All right, today we're cracking open a historical cold case. It's a real puzzle of mistaken identity, where the victims, well, they're monsters. And the crime scene, it's been frozen in stone for more than 150 years.
So let's set the scene. The year is 1853. We're in Victorian London, an age just buzzing with incredible invention and ambition. But on New Year's Eve, something really bizarre is about to happen. Forget your fancy ballrooms, the most exclusive dinner party in town is being held inside a monster.
And there it is. Seriously, 21 of the era's absolute top minds, we're talking scientists and thinkers, all invited by a sculptor named Benjamin Waterhouse Hawkins, are dining inside the plaster mold of an Iguanodon. They're toasting the creation of the world's first ever dinosaur park at London's Crystal Palace. I mean, what an absolutely unforgettable scene. Okay, so let's get our detective hats on. It's time to dive into our historical crime scene and see exactly how these incredible creatures were brought back to life. Now, every good investigation needs a lead detective, and in this case, it's the brilliant and frankly formidable Sir Richard Owen. He was the scientific mastermind behind the whole project. In fact, he's the guy who invented the word dinosaur, which literally means terrible lizard. Pretty cool, huh? But here's the huge problem that Owen and Hawkins were up against. They weren't working with complete skeletons. You have to remember, paleontology was a brand new science. They had a few teeth here, maybe a thigh bone there, and that was about it. The rest, it all had to be filled in with educated guesses and a whole lot of imagination. All right, let's bring in our first suspect. This is the Iguanodon, and believe me, it's hiding a pretty big secret. So take a good look at this thing. The way they imagined it was this massive, four-legged lizard, almost like a giant iguana got mixed up with a rhinoceros. And of course, the most famous feature, that little sharp horn sitting right on its snout. So let's look at the rap sheet here. The case against this version is pretty solid. That nose horn, that's a classic case of mistaken identity. Its whole posture is just wrong. And the skin, pure guesswork. You could say this animal has been framed.
So how on earth did they get it so wrong? Well, the logic actually seemed pretty sound at the time. First, a fossil hunter named Gideon Mantle finds these teeth that look just like a modern iguana's, only way, way bigger. Then, this strange cone-shaped bone turns up nearby, so they connect the dots. It must be a giant iguana, and that bone must be a horn, right? It was a logical leap, just a leap in the completely wrong direction.
For decades, this rhino lizard was the accepted image. But then, in 1878, we get the big break in the case. Miners over in Belgium hit the paleontological jackpot. Dozens of complete, perfectly preserved iguanodon skeletons. The truth was finally about to come out. And boom, here's the big reveal. That so-called nose horn wasn't a horn at all. It was a deadly thumb spike, probably used for self-defense. And that clumsy four-legged beast? Nope. It was actually capable of walking on two legs, a much more dynamic, agile creature than anybody had ever imagined. Case closed.
But the Iguanodon wasn't the only case of mistaken identity in the park. Let's turn our attention to the fearsome Megalosaurus.
So this was actually the very first dinosaur ever to be scientifically named, but the fossil evidence they had was even worse. And the result is, well, it kind of looks like a giant bear with the head of a crocodile. They built it as this lumbering, four-legged crawler with a really strange hump on its shoulders. So the key errors here are pretty huge. Richard Owen figured an animal this massive had to walk on four legs just to hold itself up. And that shoulder hump, that was actually a piece of a backbone from a totally different dinosaur that got stuck on by mistake. It's basically a Frankenstein's monster of a reconstruction. The truth, as it turns out, is way more terrifying. We now know Megalosaurus was a powerful, two-legged predator, a true terrible lizard, related to giants like T-Rex. It was an agile hunter, not the slow-moving crawler stuck in the mud at Crystal Palace. So both of our main suspects were completely misidentified. What's the final verdict on these glorious mistakes? You see, as science moved forward, the sculptures started to look a bit silly. By the late 1800s, other paleontologists were openly mocking them. One famous American scientist, Othniel Charles Marsh, called them a great injustice to the real animals. They had become scientific embarrassments. But check out this wild timeline. In 1854, they're scientific marvels. By 1895, they're a laughingstock. But then, Jump to 2007, and they're given the highest level of historic protection in the UK, the same status as Buckingham Palace. So you have to ask, why? Why protect something that is so spectacularly wrong?
Well, the answer has to do with something called cultural inertia. This chart is fascinating. It's from a study where students were asked to draw a T-Rex. Now, scientists have known for over 50 years that T-Rex stood horizontally. But look, the huge majority still draw it in that old-fashioned, upright, tail-dragging pose.
And this really shows you why. These outdated scientific ideas, they get stuck in our popular culture, in movies and cartoons, and yep, even in our dinosaur-shaped chicken nuggets. These old images become cultural touchstones long after the science has moved on. And the Crystal Palace statues, they are ground zero for this whole phenomenon.
And that's why they are so important today. They aren't just wrong. They are a priceless, three-dimensional snapshot of a moment in time. They preserve the very first, bold, fearless attempt by humanity to figure out what these incredible creatures were like. They show us how science really works, through trial, error, and a ton of imagination.
Which brings us to a final little thought experiment. Imagine you're a guest at that dinner party in 1853. You've time traveled from today. Do you lean over to the sculptor and whisper, hey, excuse me, but that horn is actually a thumb spike? Or do you just raise your glass, enjoy your meal, and let history unfold just the way it did?
Ultimately, the Crystal Palace dinosaurs remind us of something really profound. They show us that science isn't just a collection of dry facts in a textbook. It's a creative, it's a messy, and it's a deeply human journey. It starts with a few clues, a bold question, and the imagination to see a whole lost world.